6 steps basically. When you are testing an API calls, you follow this workflow steps, right? So testing API calls remains the same. It follows the CRUD operations, and this is what we discussed in the last step. Now this is for the API automation. So we discussed 2 tools, like you can test the API calls individually via the Swagger, or you can use Postman as well to test these individual calls. When you are using Postman, what does additional advantage it gives is you can create a workflow of steps. You can store the all individual API calls into a collection, and then you can extract your information from the response, store into variables, and reuse those variables across different calls, right? Say, for example, we created a pet, we got the ID, we stored that into the variables, and then we were able to use into the second call, which is a get call, to get the pet information for that given pet ID. You can't do the same thing in Swagger, hence Postman is more handy and it's very easy to use as well. Now, there are more things you can do, like how can you create even and further automation workflow which is working on a complex environment like integrated environments. You can create a further workflow as well. So right now you are fine with API testing using Postman. You want to become an automation tester. We discussed different options. To start with was API automation tester. You can write test cases using Postman. You can write test cases using, there are different libraries as I'm going to discuss. So if you're using C#, you can use like REST Sharp as a library. You can use, if you're using Java, you can go with REST assured libraries, and there are HTTP libraries as well to test the API calls. So we'll talk about the framework. But before then, you make up your mind. The first question comes in, I want to become an automation tester. What do I do? First, you need to understand that what exactly you need to learn, what you need to look at when you want to become an automation tester. So yes, your answer is yes, you want to learn automation testing. That's why you're here in this discussion with me. What you need to understand, what are the skill set and tools are required to become an automation tester? What are the tools and are the job requirements are to become an automation tester and get into the job market? So you need to understand all that skills and tool set, and that's where I'm going to discuss next is you need to choose which language, which tool set you need to pick, because as a start point, you can pick anything. You need to understand why you're doing automation and why you want to learn automation, right? So there are many things around which might confuse you. First thing, why automation testing, right? There's a need, like whether you want to get into a job market, because every job requires you to understand the automation testing. So that is the first reason why automation testing is, because you want to get into the job market, and that you need to understand the automation tools and testing methodologies used into automation testing. Why people follow the automation testing is you need to understand automation testing is like saves our efforts and time. And if you are saving, say for example, testing an application takes 5 days for one automation tester, and if you automate all the steps that manual tester is doing or that functional tester is doing, by automating you can execute those steps in 1 day, right? So you're going to save 4 days of effort for one tester. That is why organizations are more focused in automation testing. It is not a replacement, but it is very useful. So interview question comes in, like why automation testing? Why people are so much focused on automation testing, right? People can ask, and how do you add value as an automation tester? So that is one answer of that, because it saves your time. You can reduce the manual effort dependency. The testers can focus into other areas. With the automation, you can run the repetitive steps without much dependency, and you can get the results quickly, right? So that is where this answer comes in very handy. Why automation testing is, that's the reason. Second is like increasing coverage. As a functional and manual tester, say if you're testing an application, you cannot test everything. If there are 50 scenarios and you have to give a sign off on testing that I have tested everything. If you have to test those 50 complex scenarios, you cannot test everything. As a manual tester, you have a limited capacity as a human as well. And if you do the same steps again because of any bugs has come, you have to retest, that becomes like a difficult to test the application. So to cover more areas, that's where automation testing helps, because as I mentioned, the first step, you got 50 test cases. If you have to test it manually, it takes 5 days. And once automation is done, it takes, say, 1 day of effort. Then even 4 days of effort, you can add more test data coverage into the existing automation framework which is created. So it can cover more features, more functionalities if automation is done rather than person doing it manually. Accuracy, when you're testing manually, you tend to maybe miss some areas because you're under pressure, or you have to test so many things at a given point in time. If you have automation, you can actually put the steps as application needs to be tested in the automation. It improves the accuracy in testing because you have already written those steps, you have written the expected and actual results are going to provide it in the actual execution steps. So you compare those responses with the human. There are chances that you can make mistakes somewhere. So it's always good to have the accuracy in the results. Manual intervention. As I mentioned, if you have automation in place, you don't need to spend time manually looking at the screen and validating everything on the screen. If you have that, then the system, the steps, automated steps you have written can do the job for you. So the first thing you need to understand, like this is one of the interview questions people ask, is like, or they look for what value addition it does if you want to become an automation tester, and why automation testing is required. So these are some of my understandings and findings, which I've just put as a steps to help people understand why automation testing is important. Yeah. So go through the steps and read just to make sure you understand what I've just explained. And it'll be easy to understand. It's very simple English language I've written. It's not like big words, but it just explains the simple benefits in here. Now, second question comes in. The first you understand, that's why I said you are in here in this session. And from the organization perspective, these are the benefits. Now, next questions comes in. What do I choose? There are so many things around, right? I don't know which one is right for me. What do I do to pick like that particular language, or what do I do in terms of selection of those languages? Which language you have to choose is which you are comfortable with, as I said, right? So I can guide you. You don't need to worry about like, okay, do I select this language, or, C sharp? Should I select C sharp or Java, JavaScript or Python? My always suggestion to any automation testers is language is not it should not be a barrier to understand the automation. Your perspective goes back to the step one, is you need to understand what you're trying to achieve with the automation. So when you're selecting a language, if you're working in an organization, what happens is you need to see and look around. If do you have an existing automation pack which is already written, right? You need to follow that language. But if you're a new to job and you have not seen automation before and you're trying to learn, actually, that's the first time you're looking at, you pick any language. You just need to understand the concept, what we are trying to achieve by the automation. So you need to have a purpose before. So do you want to learn the automation because it's a job requirement? Either you want to get into the job market, or you already have been working in an organization as a manual tester. You want to move to automation testing. So both of them going to work little differently. For you, you can start with C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, or Python. So understanding JavaScript frameworks is easy, but I would say Java is here from quite some time. C Sharp is very much in demand nowadays. So you should start with C Sharp. Any of the languages, it's easy to understand the concepts. It's easy to implement the automation framework. Just need to put little effort in around any of the area if it is new for you. Now, most of the things, like if you look around, people suggest different type of languages, but we'll go through that whichever you want to pick in. So you need to be clear, language is not a barrier here, right? It's just like you are not sure which one to pick it up. C sharp is in demand. Java has been always there. It's up to you. JavaScript is very easy to learn. So any framework you can choose, any language you can choose. Now, after the languages here, we'll come to show you all of them to you. If you want to just have a look and say, okay, which one looks easy to you, you can pick that one up. Okay. Now, next comes in which framework to select, right? That's another question. Like, I'm not sure what the framework is and what way do I start with? How do I select the framework? Look, if you go with the framework selections, there are many frameworks in the market. If you talk about, say, Java, you're picking Java as a language. There are different frameworks as you can look around. If you working on Java, you can pick up TestNG. There's a Cucumber framework, JUnit, JBehave, Serenity, Selenide. You must hear all these different type of frameworks around. What is framework? I'll explain in a little bit. Okay. Then you have like if you're talking about just the UI framework or talking about API automation, there are different libraries which comes into picture and which differs according to Java or C Sharp. We will not go into that details, but I'm just explaining on high level. When you talk about Java, there are different frameworks. And I won't confuse you by just showing the names. I'm happy to show you one of the framework for every language and then you understand. But we should not jump into so many things at a point. We'll pick one and we'll go with that. So you understand what the framework looks like. What do we people call like framework and what all elements or components does it contain? If you have a C sharp, then there are different type of frameworks. Again, you can use spec flow runner, you can have NUnit framework, XUnit, then MS test. Some organizations uses MS test, some organizations using NUnit. This is just a framework and it helps you run your test into that particular framework. JavaScript, there are many around actually. So Cypress is one of them. WebDriver IO, there are Jasmine, Nightwatch, Protector, Selenium WebDriver, Puppeteer. So there are many frameworks which you can go with. Most of the time you must hear like, okay, Selenium WebDriver is the only one, right? The Selenium WebDriver with the C sharp, like it's a Selenium WebDriver helps us automating the UI components. Okay, so this is just if I'm not talking about this just as a framework, but this is like kind of a library you're using. You can use here as well. This is just a language, but inside that there are different runners, and this is one of the library you're using. Okay. Then you have Puppeteer. So these are different options. I'll show you again few of them and you just have a look and see what we are talking about. Before we jump into details, let's just go through that when people talk about like different languages, what framework they talk about. So this is a PyTest. This got like different. So we will not talk about Python right now. Python is also in demand, but depends how comfortable you are. If it is an API automation, then you have different, as I already mentioned. So you can have a Postman, which we already discussed. You can have like a test the APIs via Swagger. There is a Postman with Newman. Newman is nothing, but whatever test you are writing, as you go to collections and you run the collections, right, manually from the Postman UI, you can have, there is a tool which is a command line tool. You can just run the same collections via the command line as well. So this is a Postman with Newman as well. And there is a curl command I did discuss. This is again command line tool. So you can execute your API calls via the curl command as well. So you should be familiar. You don't need to know everything, but these are the good names to know. Like when somebody talks about, at least this doesn't look like a new thing to you. That's why this list is being here. Okay. So if you're, yes, you have any questions? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Okay, so there are two different things. When you are the framework is nothing, but it's how you arrange your automation test, right? That is what we call, like in the framework you have your test runner through which you have to run your test. Then you have to use like how you're going to arrange your test basically. All of them, when we talk, when yeah, when we talk about framework, actually I'm happy to show you one screen and say which helps you understand what the framework looks like. So let's just go through this and I'll show you what the framework means, and I'll explain you like with one example so that you get the clarity of what framework is and what. So Java, C Sharp is a different language, right? So you pick any of the framework, then framework as in like for the automation testing, but you need to still have a language because you need to write a test, right? Using in that framework you have to write test. So that coding part is what written in different languages. So you need to understand when you pick any of the frameworks, then you need to be sure that you're picking the right set of language. Yeah, you cannot have like a test ng but you're writing test in C sharp, right? That's where the compatibility is, in which language and what framework. Okay. So when you are selecting a framework, right? So say for example you have test ng as a framework, you have to pick testng and then you have to write code in Java. You cannot have testng framework but write code in C sharp, right? That's where these are the compatible with say Java. But Cucumber is like a concept how you write BDD test cases that can be in this C sharp as well, right? I'll explain you with an example. Yeah. So before we jump deep into frameworks, I'll list one more thing here as whenever you're picking any of the language, right, you have to write a code somewhere. Yeah. So whichever language you select, your IDE is going to be compatible with that. So say for example you have a Java, then you have to select either you can write code using IntelliJ or you can write code using Eclipse. If you're picking C sharp, you can have different IDE as a WebStorm. You can have like a Visual Studio. I have used Visual Studio, and organization also uses Visual Studio. If you're using JavaScript, then say you can use Visual Studio Code. That is another IDE, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, giving an example of how all these looks like. The Python, you can again use, I have used Visual Studio to write the code in Python as well, right? So you have to select, depending on the language, your choice of ID is going to be according to the language selection. As I mentioned, I'm using Visual Studio Code for Python and JavaScript, IntelliJ and Eclipse for Java, and Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio for C Sharp. I'm primarily using Visual Studio for C Sharp, say for example. So I did send you a link to install Visual Studio for C Sharp. And if you are using Java, then you have to install like one of these into your local environment. Yeah. So that is pretty much about like your selections, right? Now come back to framework, like how do you write a simple test case basically, right? So if you take an example of like you say for example you go to Google and you type some test, you type some text in the Google and then you press enter, and then you manually check the results return is according to your search criteria, right? That's the manual testing you are doing. But what if you have to write a step for the same, right? So you can select any tool and any language in here to do that step. So I think call is going to finish actually in another 10 minutes. So I'm not sure if I should start the another session right now. Otherwise we'll disconnect. So do you have any questions? Maybe I'm happy to take your questions and explain what the framework looks like. And in the meantime, I'll open actually one of the, I was going to show you how the framework, when we talk about framework, what framework means, right? Just a second. Yeah, no, that's all right. I need to just find the okay. So I'm just going to just a second. Okay, I could open the another file, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, a different screen actually. Okay, new share, and this is the one. Okay. Do you see my screen? Okay, just a second. Let me share again. Share screen. Okay, can you see it now? Okay. So if you look at this, so this is an example of the framework using or Cypress, okay, which is a JavaScript framework, right? So what is Cypress? Cypress is, if you look at this Cypress, you can Google as well. It's a JavaScript framework to automate the UI. You can automate APIs as well. So it's an end-to-end UI automation framework for JavaScript. So this is what Cypress does. When we talk about the framework contains the different components actually in it, right? It's not just the language, or it's not just the name of it. So Cypress itself end-to-end automation testing framework written in JavaScript. And what does it contain is, when we talk about frameworks, right? In any framework, you have your configuration files, like what exactly you want to run on. You see the package.json, it contains, this is kind of a control file which contains your all the dependencies, what is required to run the project, also which version we need to use. So it does have a file as a package.json. So I'll help you understand. If you want to start with JavaScript, I am happy to take you through that. Then it will have the configuration files, which includes like which URL you want to use in which environment you want to go and run the test on. Along with that, it does have some reusable commands and variables where you can reuse in your code. So there are some files which are related to reusable commands and variables. Then you have one folder which contains your all different test cases actually, right? So this is your test case here. Then you have like another folder which defines your test data as well, right? So what you see in here when you are installing, so you need to do some installations before actually you come to this stage, right? So say you pick Cypress, which is a JavaScript automation framework, right? So what you need to understand is, how do we install Cypress, right? What do we need to write the code in? So you need to have IDE where you can write a code, which is your Visual Studio Code. Then you need to know how to install Cypress, right? Then you need to know the commands for the Cypress. And then after you install that, what you need to understand, because it does do, it installs everything. You don't need to remember anything. You just need to remember what commands to use in, right? So you can pick that framework and say, this is how the component is going to look like. So most of the interview questions, what comes in, how did the framework look like on which you have worked, right? That's the first questions comes in. And this is what the framework is. Like you have your configuration file, you have your package.json file, which contains your all the dependencies. You have your configuration file, which contains your main URL of the application. Then there are some reusable commands, and I can explain you what these reusable commands looks like. You do have your test cases written under one of the integration folder. It got like a different types of test cases. So this is like a functional test cases. There could be like a smoke test as well, right? There are different types of testing you can do. And then you have your test data as well, because you need to run the test on some scenarios which are using you to pass the data on, right? So it does have like a fixtures folder. It does provide functionality where you can define your test data. So this is what you need to understand from the framework perspective. That framework consists of these main areas and these main the setup. Whether it's any framework you talk about, whether it's a TestNG, whether it's C# spec flow runners, or whether you're talking about Cypress, WebDriver IO, any frameworks you talk about, every framework which you're building for API or UI or any automation does contain these components. How your test data setup is going to look like, how you store your test cases, how they look like, how do you call your test data to the test cases, what are the reusable commands, what you are using, like how do you call them, then your configuration files, how do you pass the URL basically, right? That's where this JSON file comes into picture. And then package.json is a control file. It contains all the commands, dependencies, and you want any libraries that needs to be installed, and that version is maintained into the package.json. So that's how the framework looks like. Does it give you some insight on exactly your question on what the framework is? So this is what the framework looks like when you talk about, say, Cypress automation. Yeah. So if you just go and Google, say, Cypress, just the Cypress keyword, you type on Google, it will give you a link and it'll talk about what the Cypress is actually, and it will give you all the steps what you can do with Cypress. Like it's kind of a learning that one framework itself, but so many informations are there, right? So this is how the framework is going to look like. If I just stop sharing that and let me open if I got something. So I'm happy if you don't want. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I was going to show. This was just to help you quickly. How does it look like? So I was just explaining. I might not use that as an example. So if you want to say sorry, just go. Call is going to end. So if you want to start with Cypress, right? Let's start with that. It's very easy to understand. There's another one which is a Puppeteer as well. You should be able to quickly install and do the setup in your machine. So do you have the Windows machine or the Mac? Windows machine. Okay, then it'll be easy. So let's start with maybe JavaScript just to start with, right? So because it does provide you lots of information quick to use. So let's start with JavaScript. So we can pick either Cypress or Puppeteer, whichever you feel is easy for you to do. Okay. The call is going to just stop in few minutes. So I'll set up another session and then let's connect again. Okay. Yeah. Okay. See you then. I'll send you the link, Bhargavi. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. Yeah. Click on next. So we are installing Visual Studio Code here. You have downloaded the exe and now we are installing Visual Studio Code. Click on next. 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 Click on next. What exactly? It's create a desktop icon. Yeah, install. Good. Finish. It will launch the Visual Studio Code. You might need to share your other screen, which is Visual Studio Code actually. If you click on new share, it will give an option to can you click close on the get started? Okay, this is how you see once you start the Visual Studio Code for the first time, the empty black screen. Now you have to create a folder somewhere in your desktop or your, any folder. Create a folder and then open it here. Open that folder, go to File, Open Folder. Yeah, folder. Okay, yes. Go on the top, there is a terminal. Can you click on terminal? On the top menu after Run, yeah. You need to open a terminal, new terminal. Okay, that's the command line. So can you type clear here just to clear the screen? On the bottom screen, the terminal here, can you type clear? Okay, so clear is enter. Okay, so now can you, the middle, there is a line in the middle. Can you just like hold and scroll it little up so we can see the terminal window a bit more? Yeah, cool. So now what we are doing is, so the clear is to clear the terminal. If you have written type something, you don't want to see it. That's why you use the clear command. Now we are talking about Cypress. So we need to install some of the libraries before we can install the framework or download the framework, right? What we need for it is a JavaScript framework. So I'll give you a link, just open that and it will take you through all the steps. Actually, instead of I tell you, I'll guide you to how to look at. Just a second. Okay, getting started. So I have sent you a link on the chat. You open that. Oh, that's all right. If you go to chat on the Zoom, actually, not on the LinkedIn, on the art chat only, Zoom chat. If you click on the bottom, there's a chat option. Click on that, you should be able to see a link. And also, can you click on a new share and select this window as well, or the browser window? So you can share actually Visual Studio Code as well as you can share the document which you're going to open as I've asked you. So you can share two windows at the same time. You have to do a new share and then select that browser. Can you do that? Okay. Yes, I can see that, right? So now what? Yes, I can see. So I can see your browser, but I can't see your Visual Studio Code. Can you open Visual Studio Code? I can, if you click on that, let me see if I can see that as well. Yeah, I can see both. Now what you need to do is, so we need, before we can set up the Cypress, we need a few things to be done, right? So if you go to the document pack, and if you look at that document, can you go to the browser? Sorry, click on the browser. No, it's the same where you open that Cypress things. Yeah, last one. Yeah. Okay, if you scroll down, it talks about what all installation you need to do. It gives you end-to-end steps, right? To start with, what we need is we need an npm to be set up in your system first, right? So if you just go back to the terminal and Visual Studio Code, yeah, here So you need to set up package.json first, right? So what you can do, can you type npm space init? Yeah, npm, that is a npm is a node package manager space init, init. Init is initialization of the project, and space hyphen y is one of the parameter we use to set up the configuration. No, hyphen y is one together. Hyphen y for yes. Yeah, that's it. Press enter. When you do that, it will ask you what kind of configuration you want to set up. Okay. So you don't have the npm set up into your system. Okay, let me send you another. You need to set up npm. Give me a second. Let me send you a command. So you need to install actually Node.js basically as well. So I'll send you another link in the chat. Yeah, I've sent you on the chat. Can you just open that link and download Node.js? Because this is the first time actually you're trying, so you need to install Node.js as well. Can you see the link on the chat? Okay, because I can't see your other screen, so. Sorry, say that again. I can't see your, yes, I can't see your other screen, so I can't see the browser where you're opening that Node.js. So you see, when you click on that, yeah, I can see it now. So you can click on the 1812. Generally, I'm using 16, I think, but just let's try to download 18. Click on that. It will download one more exe. So yeah, click on next. Select that option. I accept. Click next. Next. Yeah, next. Next. You can just, I can't actually read probably what it says. Automatically install the necessary tools. Install the something, I don't know. Click on next. You can take it, that's fine. If it is nothing specific, you can install. Yeah, next. Install. It just takes a while, so which is all right. So what you are preparing yourself today is you're installing all the tool set required. So you will need Node.js, you will need Visual Studio Code to write the code, which I've already done, and you're setting up the Node package manager. It is required to run your all the commands and all the dependencies. Okay, finish. Yeah, what it says. Yeah, just press enter key, any key to set up. The script is without any. Okay, can you enter again? It's not sure what it's trying to install, but let's try. Can you go back to Visual Studio Code till it is doing something? Yes, I can see. Can you go to Visual Studio Code now? Click on that Visual Studio Code icon. I see the blank screen. Are you see any text on here? Okay, I just see the blank. You can press enter. That's fine if you see that. Yeah, go to Visual Studio Code actually. And can you press up arrow key from the keyboard? It should give you npm init -y command. Okay, you are running, no, so your underscore you typed actually should be hyphen, as I said, not underscore. Yeah, press enter. Okay, I think you need to, it's not installed yet. Can you go back to that Node.js window which was showing? No, that installation window is going on, right? Yeah, so that is done. Press, you can close that. Can you restart your Visual Studio? Yeah, just open it again. Close the existing window. You can open it from there as well. Just go, yeah, close that and open it again. Just a second. I am. Can you type npm version here? Okay. First, can you type clear first? At the bottom, you can't do it. At the bottom of the screen. Yeah. Type clear. Okay. Now, can you type the same command? Say npm version. Can you type npm? No, remove that. Say space version, version, version. We are just checking whether npm is installed. Click enter. Yeah. Okay, now it is installed. Can you type clear now? And let's run our other command. Okay. Yeah. Now npm init -y, the same type command. Can you type it? Yeah. Enter. Okay. So do you see there is a one file got created under Cypress folder, the package.json on the left hand side. So when we do npm init -y, it creates a JSON file, package.json, which is going to store your all the dependencies for the Node.js projects. Okay. That is what the npm does. So Node Package Manager initializes a file which is going to store your all the dependencies. Now go back to that browser window where that Cypress documentation was. Now what we'll do, we'll install Cypress, okay? Third window. So if you see that npm install Cypress --save dev, can you copy that command? This is to install the Cypress in your local. Yeah. Go back to Visual Studio. Yeah, paste it here. Enter. You can close that warning, whichever is coming on the right hand side. On the bottom, yeah. So it takes some time, and this installation might go a little longer than you can think of, right? So we can keep discussing. So you can install this. What it is going to do is it's going to do all the components installation for Cypress. Okay. What I'll do is you stop sharing. I'll share my screen. Once your installation is done, it might take maybe sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 2 minutes, and sometimes it goes for longer depending on your network as well. So you stop sharing. Yeah, I will. That's what I'm going to show you. Just if you stop screen, what it is going to do is it is going to set up a folder structure like this. So what it is doing is what command you have run, it is going to install a lots of packages. So this is what the folder should get created under your Cypress folder actually. So it will have this node modules, and it will have some other files created under that as well. And you will have this package.json, which doesn't have anything right now. but I will show you how can you run the commands actually. So once you have installed the Cypress and the command line finished, you should be able to go and run, or you should be able to see actually in your local as well. It will show a command line how to run the test. That will give a default commands you can use to run the test. Basically, I am going to share this command with you. Where is that screen? Zoom meeting and chat. So this is the command you can run. Instead of run, if you just want to run all the tests, you can do that as well. So once your installation is completed, yeah, no, that's all right. Yeah, a little bit is there, but that's all right. It's not disturbing me. But if it's disturbing you, then I'm okay. Like, that's fine. So what you do is run, once installation is completed on the command line, you type this npx cypress open. You should be able to see some suggestions on the bottom once the command line finishes the installation, right? You should be able to see that it will ask you can run this command to open Cypress. You can run this command to, run the test. So once you run this command, it will open a UI. So it is going to show you all the tests. Like by default, it creates some tests in the folders. You can go and open the Cypress and it will give you options to run different tests under that. So it takes a while to open for the first time. It just takes time for the first time when it is opening, and it's really like a heavy library because it goes so many packages under it. And also there is a video already on my YouTube channel. If you're stuck anywhere actually that contains each and every step, how to install, like from the basics actually. After, since you have already set up the Node.js, you have already set up the Visual Studio Code, then after that I have given all the commands in the video, how to like navigation as well, what each folder does, as I've explained you in another like before session, how the folder structure going to look like, what folders contains. And in the next session, I can go in details and write like one small test case, pick like one small test case, and we can go through that, and you can write actually by yourself as well. So I have run this command, and what it does open is, I'm going to share one more screen because it opens actually in another screen. So it will open a screen like this, right? It will show you all the test cases. So this is kind of a UI screen it does provide, where you can see all your test cases. So you have this integration folder, which is like under Cypress. It creates this integration folder, and it does have all the tests in here. All the tests are visible in the UI as well, like this. So say you want to run a specific test, what you can do is, and it's going to run on Windows like Chrome, you can select that particular test, click on that, and you can see it is going to open another window, which is running actually outside my. So it is going to run a test. You can see that window where the browser is running the test. Okay. So I have started that to-do spec .js, and it is like test is getting loaded, as you can see, right? So it will run the test. So these are actually the default test being provided into the that framework installation what we are doing. So these tests comes by default, and it is just helpful for you to understand how all the tests are running. So what it does is it provides you all the steps in terms of what exactly it is doing. So if you go to this test, before the test it is opening this URL, and then it is checking all these different elements into it, like in the page it does exist. Then it can add new to do items. So if you go to further screens, it is trying to add new items. Then another test case is check off an item out of list, right? So you can see this is ticked and crossed, right? So it is trying to cross that item. Then it says with a checked task. This is another test case, which is like you can look at the test case, what exactly it is doing. So this is how the Cypress does is it does provide a UI where you can see all the test cases and you can run them individually or you can run all of them together as well. So you can open via this or you can go to Visual Studio, back to Visual Studio, and I think it's just showing me because I've started the test in here. You can go and run the test via the command line as well. In that case, you have to specify npx cypress run. It is going to run all the tests. There are options that you can run individual tests and like that as well. So what the framework looks like, you don't need to actually do anything. Only thing you need to understand is what this package.json contains, then what is this cypress.json contains, what are these different folders are, that's what you need to understand. And I have explained that very well into my video, one of the Cypress video. And these test cases, as I mentioned, this is like a specific test cases provided as part of the framework installation. So you don't need to actually understand everything. From the part of the framework, what you need to understand, what is the fixtures folder, what is the integration folder, and say I have a specific simple test which I've written is I am going to say google.com, and then I'm going to input some keywords and I'm validating. Or you can't see the screen. Okay, just a second. I thought I have shared it, but looks like I just didn't. Can you see it now? Sorry about that. Okay, so what I was explaining is what you need to understand. After the installation, you should see a structure like this. What you need to understand is these folders gets created by default. Once you run that, after the installation, you need to run npx cypress open or npx cypress run command. Then you should see a folder structure like this after the installation. You need to understand what these folders are. Say, for example, as I explained, fixture is actually to maintain your test data. You can keep all your test data under fixtures. Integration folder is by default, it gives you integration. You can rename this folder, give any name you want to. It does have subfolders like where you can feature wise divide which test case needs to go into which folder. So you can create many folders and write test under that. Just for your understanding, a simple test case, what I've created is on like a Google search, right? Which I will take you through in a little while. What does it do and how does it look like? And you can copy and paste the same to write a different test as well. Now, also you see the plugins. As I mentioned, there are two folders like plugins contains the default plugins, as well as you can write reusable commands under these support folders. I'll explain each and every the file in next session, because today's you need to understand just the folder structure. Videos is whenever you're running a test, what does it do? It keeps a recording here in these folders for every test execution you do. So I say executed that one test as I just now showed you to do spec.js file. I ran it. Spec is for specifications where you are writing your test. Node modules is nothing. It's a default. All the libraries are stored under whatever is installed is stored under node modules. So this contains all your libraries. Cypress.json, you can define your configurations in it. So